Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here. I'm here by myself. So I know last week we didn't get a recap podcast up for you guys. I wanted to make sure we did get something up. There was a chance that Rogers and I would have been able to do something Wednesday night instead of Tuesday night, but you know what? We wanted to make sure something got up because we know we kind of dropped the ball last week, but we're back. We're rolling. I'm here by myself. It is Tuesday night, and we are sponsored by No Halftime, you guys. The No Halftime app isn't your typical fantasy sports service. You get to create one-on-one fantasy matchups, and you can use the code LTFF for a 100% deposit bonus. All right, so check it out, guys. Right now, it is Tuesday night. When you hear this, it's probably going to be Wednesday morning, maybe Wednesday afternoon. But basically, we're going to be recapping week 5 right now. We're going to be going some of the pertinent news, injuries, cool shit, weak shit, and then, you know, a preview of the Thursday night game real quick. So we'll make sure we get all of that done. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to drink my terrible cup of coffee, my coffee maker. I think I need to get a new one because the coffee that it makes tastes extremely bad. But I'm going to drink my terrible cup of coffee and we're going to go through this. So I'll get on right into it, you guys. So first, we're going to go through some injuries. One of the ones that we really saw play itself out on Monday night in that awful game, which I will touch more on later, was Charles Sims. Charles Sims is currently on the IR. It is unclear if this is going to be something where he's on IR and designated to return, or if he's just on IR. I don't believe it's been announced yet. Maybe by the time this comes out and hits your ears, it will have been. But at this point, Charles Sims is on IR. We don't know if he's going to return or not. And Jaquiz Rogers is the running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is just not something I expected to really say in 2016. Moving on from there, Cody Kessler injured his ribs. They brought in Charlie Whitehurst. He did see the field. Cody Kessler is expected to be ready for week 6. It's also possible that Josh McCown will be back for week 6. He's returning to practice this week. And the aforementioned Charlie Whitehurst actually got cut, and they elevated Kevin Hogan, the former Stanford quarterback, who I saw a couple times out here, going to Stanford games. Great place to see a game, by the way, if you ever get the chance. But yes, Kevin Hogan is on the active roster now. We'll see what happens with Kessler and McCown going forward. Trevor Siemian, expected. What am I sound like a kindergartner. Trevor Siemian is expected to return on Thursday for the Thursday night game against the Chargers. He was limited in practice on Monday, but this is most likely good. I mean, we saw Sanders and Thomas produce a little bit this past week with Paxton Lynch in there. But Siemian seems like an upgrade over Paxton Lynch at this point. Eddie Lacy left the Sunday night game with an ankle injury. Mike McCarthy says it's not serious. So Lacy is expected to play this week as of right now. James Starks has not looked good this year in limited action. Not that Lacy has been a world beater or anything like that. Maybe a world eater, a Fat Eddie Lacy joke. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. In past years, Starks has been good while Lacy is out, but Lacy is not expected to really miss any time. Cam Newton missed the ugly Monday night game. He is still in the concussion protocol. We don't really know at this point whether he will be active. I think the suspicion is that he will be, but you can never really tell with concussions. We've seen Sam Shields, the Packers cornerback, be held out for multiple weeks at this point with a concussion. So it's difficult to tell. Keep an eye on that news. Another quarterback with a concussion here, Carson Palmer. He has been cleared to play for week 6. So just keep that in mind. Carson Palmer is going to go, and we'll see what happens there. The Cardinals did not look particularly great the past 2 weeks, but they got the job done against the Niners, and we'll see what they can do this upcoming week. D'Angelo Williams is apparently dealing with a knee injury. Not sure exactly when or how he got the injury, but that might explain why Bell has had such a huge portion of the workload. I mean, we expected Le'Veon Bell to dominate the snaps and the touches once he came back, but Williams has basically been non-existent. So maybe this is why that's the case, or maybe it's just they don't care and they want Bell to be getting all this work. Either way, Williams is dealing with a knee injury. Keep that in mind. Arian Foster likely to return for the Dolphins this week. There was talk that he might play this past weekend. He didn't. This was the first week that Jay Ajayi, or any running back really, sort of very clearly took a lead in that backfield and took a hold as the lead back. Ajayi had 13 carries, ended up getting in the end zone. Would have been a nice start if you played him. Not that we really knew that they were going to, just kind of run with one lead back. But, he likely won't be a great start here coming up if Foster really does return. And then lastly, for the injury news, before we get into just some miscellaneous news, Dez Bryant is likely to miss week 6. So this is going to be Dez's third game missed. We haven't really seen a single wide receiver sort of step up and dominate the workload within the Cowboys wide receiver core. The work's been spread between Beasley, Williams, and Bryce Butler, as well as Jason Witten has seen a bit of an uptick in targets. So we'll see what happens. They do play the Packers. The Packers' pass defense has been not great, but it's difficult really to predict what the Cowboys wide receiver core will do. And I'm sure we'll get into that more when Vinny and Don bring you the week 6 preview later this week. All right, guys. So we're going to get into some other news here. Coming up first, I guess, Mark Trestman, the offensive coordinator for the Ravens, is out. Trestman is fired. People have speculated that this is because he didn't give Terrence West enough carries this past week. I think that might be kind of feeding our own narratives. I know Terrence West did look significantly better than the rest of the running backs, but that seems like a weird reason, to just sack your OC after 5 weeks of the season. Trestman's always a guy that I've liked. I've always sort of defended him just because he was around for the Rich Gannon years with the Raiders. He sort of turned Rich Gannon from a journeyman into Rich Gannon league MVP and Rich Gannon spectacular quarterback. But it's clear that he, with the Bears and then now with the Ravens, he really hasn't been spectacular. So we'll see where he ends up. We'll see how the Ravens end up going forward. The big news of the morning was Colin Kaepernick is going to be the starter for the Niners this week. So they play the Bills. It's interesting. Marcel Darius may not go for the Bills, which I guess makes things even more interesting. There's no real reason to start Kaepernick. I guess if you're in a league where, if a 2-quarterback league for sure, but even just like maybe a 12-team league, where sort of the consensus among your league mates is that teams carry 2 quarterbacks, because there certainly are a lot of leagues like that. I know, we always talk about how you don't need to have more than 1 quarterback. You can kind of ride the waiver wire, but there are some leagues where that's harder, maybe a 12 or 14 team league where people just always carry 2 quarterbacks and you're kind of forced into it. Like Kaepernick's a nice waiver option in that case, because we know he can run. We know he's not great at reading a defense going through his progressions as an NFL quarterback, but the dude can run. So that's certainly valuable in fantasy football. Keep it in mind. And it also kind of makes us reevaluate the Niners offense as a whole. I think Carlos Hyde, we can say his role is safe, but which of these receivers is Kaepernick going to have chemistry with, if any? What kind of plays are they going to call to best emphasize his particular skill set? These are all things that we don't really know, and we should probably keep an eye out for just going forward here. And then finally, Justin Forsett signed with the Lions today. Since Amir Abdullah has gone down, they've sort of been looking for that early down back, because we know Theo Riddick is more of a passing down guy. Dwayne Washington got hurt in his opportunity to be that guy. Zach Zenner didn't really produce much. Theo Riddick is not a good between the tackles runner. So they signed Justin Forsett. We'll see how it works out. I wouldn't be rushing out to go out and pick up Forsett. Just not something that I'm really worried about. I'm also not really worried about Riddick, which I also I guess this brings us to Ed's question of the week, which was, how does the Forsett signing affect Theo Riddick? And the answer, I think, is I don't think it does. Riddick saw 66% of the snaps this past week with Zach Center playing 34%. I don't see Forsett breaking 40, 50% of the snaps. It's possible they use both of them, out on the field at certain times. Theo Riddick has split out wide in the past. I don't know that Forsett's signing affects Theo Riddick really, as much as it just sort of provides the Lions with some running back depth and sort of a veteran presence there in that backfield, someone who can be a good pass blocker when they need it, and sort of go from there. So that's the news, guys. It's going to be quiet for a quick moment because I'm going to take a big gulp of my horrible, horrible coffee, and then I'm going to get into some cool shit. Yeah, it didn't taste good at all. I'm going to keep drinking it, though. I should probably just put like milk and sugar in it and see if that, it would definitely make it taste better. But, it's a little late for that. I'm already, this far in the podcast. I don't know if it's going to happen at this point. So, all right, guys, let's get into some cool shit that happened this past week. And we're going to start with Sammy Coates. Sammy Coates had 11 targets, 6 catches, 139 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This was against the Jets, that secondary that's just been absolute toast all season, getting burned on deep balls constantly. So it made a lot of sense that Sammy Coates just really went off. He's going to be a really popular waiver wire pickup this week, I'm sure, if he's not already owned in your league, which, to be honest, he probably wasn't. The thing with Sammy Coates, though, is that he's a boomer bust option. Primarily a deep ball receiver. And also they're going to get Eli Rogers back this week, or they likely will. So Eli Rogers started out the season playing the slot. Marcus Wheaton has been in the slot while Rogers has been out. It's a little difficult now to project exactly how those wide receiver snaps are going to break down because Eli Rogers, we don't know if he's just going to go back into the slot. We don't know if that's going to kick Wheaton outside where he's been in the past, or if Wheaton's going to get benched. If Rogers is going to get benched, Wheaton's going to stick in the slot. Maybe Sammy Coates loses some snaps. So just keep that in mind when you're picking up Sammy Coates. I think you should be picking him up because we've seen what he can do. He provides sort of that Martavis Bryant, just deep threat, go nuts type of receiver in that offense. But keep in mind that it may not work out exactly as it did this past week. So the Titans this week, they really kind of broke out against the awful Dolphins defense. That team is so bad. But Marcus Mariota, after I basically said he hasn't done anything to show us that he should be started this year, really broke out. I believe he was QB1 this past week. And now he gets the Browns. So I think Mariota is firmly in consideration as a streamer this week. He's going to be probably a heavy waiver wire target for teams that are going out and looking to play quarterbacks based on matchup. Quarterbacks against the Browns have done pretty well this year. So with Mariota finally showing us something, I think you can expect him to be a popular pickup this week. Against the Browns this past week, Martellus Bennett and Rob Gronkowski both had huge games, which Shrek really kind of called there. I'll definitely give a lot of credit to Shrek on the Martellus Bennett call. Both of them were on the field a ton. Gronk had 81% of the snaps. Martellus Bennett had 69% of the snaps. Gronk had 7 targets, 5 catches, 109 yards. And Bennett had 8 targets, 6 catches, 67 yards, but also 3 fucking touchdowns. So that's pretty wild. If you played either of them, you were happy. I think this is sort of something, not that we should get used to it every week, because I think Bennett in particular has a very low floor, but also a huge, huge ceiling. And we saw it with other Patriots too, where Chris Hogan had a nice game on only 4 targets. I believe he had 114 receiving yards. It's also worth noting, though, that Julian Edelman led this team in targets with 10 of them. He only caught 5 for 35 yards. Julian Edelman's time is coming. Do not give up on him yet. Do not sell low on him at this point. The Falcons are very, very good. And, Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman are right at the heart of that. We've seen Julio sort of, have his big games. He certainly had a huge one in week 4. But Julio wasn't really needed. And part of that is, they're facing the Broncos secondary. It's a very good secondary. Part of that is just the Falcons offense is good enough that they don't need him each week. And Freeman and Coleman both continue to be usable. Devontae Freeman saw significantly more work in this game with 26 touches compared to Coleman's 10. But Coleman really broke those big plays in the pass game, 4 catches for 132 yards in the pass game, and he got in the end zone. So, both of these guys, their floors, again, are a little bit lower than you would want because their workloads, aren't going to be ridiculous every single game. You can probably expect 15 to 18 touches for Freeman and sort of 12 to 15 for Coleman. But this is something that, we should, at this point, you're just starting them every week, either flex, RB2, whatever you got to do there. So keep it in mind and sort of just go from there. Cameron Meredith of the Bears was an interesting play and one that really, really worked out well. He was targeted 12 times, caught the ball 9 of them, 130 yards and a touchdown there. It's worth noting that Eddie Royal and Alshon Jeffrey were both playing a bit hurt, or at least that's what they're saying about Alshon. But it's also possible at this point that Brian Hoyer just likes the flanker position in this offense because he was targeting Kevin White heavily, and Kevin White was wildly inefficient and just playing bad. Cam Meredith comes in, replaces Kevin White at that flanker position in the offense, has a huge game. So Meredith's going to be, I would think, the number 1 wide receiver, maybe Coates, but I would think Meredith should be the number 1 wide receiver picked up off the waiver wire at this point because I think his role is more secure. And we know that the Bears are going to be behind a lot, going to have to pass it a lot. With Royal and Alshon both kind of struggling through injuries at this point, Cameron Meredith may be the guy who's leading the team in targets for the foreseeable future. So yeah, definitely pick him up, definitely stash him. It's likely to continue. In that same game, Jordan Howard just had a huge game. Didn't cede any work really to Kadeem Carey. Got 95% of the snaps, 16 carries, 118 yards, and caught all 3 of his targets for 45 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Howard is an all-purpose back at this point until Jeremy Langford comes back. He's going to be used in the pass game, in the run game, no matter really the game script. And the other thing is that he's looked pretty good. So, I mean, when you combine all those things, it really just sort of goes for a running back who you can be starting every single week at this point, at least, again, until Jeremy Langford's back or until we see John Fox fuck with the situation and start using Kadeem Carey for some unknown stupid reason because John Fox likes to do things like that. But yeah, keep it going with that. Again, sticking with that same game, on the Colts side of the ball, T.Y. Hilton has 11 targets or more in every single game this season. He's currently fantasy wide receiver 2. That's not really what we expected, but with Moncrief out, maybe it is what we should have expected. Hilton's really turned into the go-to guy, which he always was, but just a consistent go-to guy at this point. He's getting 11 targets or more in every game. And with the kind of routes that Hilton runs, he's not just a short route guy like Jarvis Landry. He stretches the field as well. He runs those intermediate routes. And with his speed and talent, it's a situation that just combines for a lot of fantasy success. If you can trade for Hilton and not overpay, I'm currently trying to do that in one of my leagues. We'll see if it actually ends up happening. But if you can trade for Hilton without overpaying, I think you should. And I don't think you should be trying to sell high on Hilton either if you have him. I mean, yeah, sell high. Sorry, I worded that correctly. Confused myself. T.Y. Hilton is legit, and you should be treating him as such. We have enough of a sample size at this point to see that he is the Colts offense for the most part. For the Dallas Cowboys, we see Ezekiel Elliott just getting better and better every week. If you invested in the rookie, it is certainly paying dividends for you. 15 carries, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 4 targets, 3 catches, 37 yards. That's a huge game. Ezekiel Elliott is extremely good in this offense, and they love giving him the ball. So we know the Cowboys have this offensive line. We know they like to slow the game down. This is going to be their strategy for the whole year. And he just continues to look better and better. It's going to be interesting this week when he gets the Packers D on the road. And the Packers D has been really good against the run. They've shut down teams almost completely in the run game. That being said, they haven't really faced many teams that have been good running the ball this year. We saw them face the Vikings with Peterson being semi-hurt. We saw them face the Giants and Orleans Darkwa as the primary back. This isn't a team that's really, really been going nuts there. So I think Zeke makes an interesting contrarian play for daily fantasy this week. Because I think a lot of people are going to stay away from him as a road dog against a good run defense. But you can keep playing him every single week. And then lastly, on our list of cool shit, before I get into weak shit, we're going to talk about Amari Cooper. He broke out this week. He had 12 targets, 6 catches, 138 yards, and 1 touchdown. Cooper's been a guy who's had a lot of bad luck this year, and it's sort of continued where like he just missed out on 4 touchdowns by basically like less than 1 foot length. On 4 separate drives, he had opportunities for touchdowns. 2 of them, his big toe basically was out of bounds on sideline fades. And then the third one, he had been forced out the back of the end zone and hadn't reestablished position with 2 feet in the end zone. So he made the catch, but it didn't count because he hadn't established both feet in the playing field before he went up and got the ball. Cooper had a huge game, and the crazy thing is that it had a lot of chances to be an even bigger game. Amari Cooper is good. And if you held on to him, kept faith in him, it paid off. And I think it's going to keep continuing to pay off as we keep going this season. All right, guys, let's get into some weak shit. Actually, wait, first I'm going to drink some more coffee. All right, cool. So some of the weak shit, and this is an extremely selfish one that I'm starting with because I am a CJ Anderson owner. So the weak shit that I'm going to start with is that CJ Anderson is losing snap share. It's decreased every single week. This past week, he had 51% snap share compared to 41% to Devontae Booker. I think some of that could be due to the fact that they were down big, wanted to maybe just get Booker in there to see what he can do. But it's still not a good trend. It's not what we want to see. He hasn't been particularly effective lately. Now, that being said, he still has 4 or more targets in 4 of the 5 games, which has sort of kept him afloat in PPR. And then also this week, he should have Virgil Green and Donald Stevenson, who are the tight end, excellent blocking tight end, and right tackle for the Broncos, respectively. Both of them should be returning to the lineup this week. I think that makes a big difference. So CJ Anderson has definitely been weak shit the past couple of weeks. But I think there's a chance that he sort of returns to form and really, gets back to being this every week starting running back that we can rely on our fantasy teams. Sticking with running backs getting decreasing snap share, Matt Forte, the Jets keep losing games and he keeps not getting work in the pass game. This past week, it was a 65% to 47% snap split between himself and Bilal Powell. Bilal Powell has 23 targets in the past 3 games. That's over 7 targets a game. Matt Forte is not getting those targets. So it's interesting because these games that the Jets are losing, Powell becomes a very playable option and Forte becomes less and less attractive. He really needs to be a very efficient runner or get in the end zone in order to avoid being a disappointment for your team. So it's something to think about, in the Jets games where they're not a favorite. Maybe if you have better running back matchups, you bench Forte. I don't think he's an every week start like we thought he was going to be after the first 2 weeks when he was seeing like 30 some odd touches a game. The Cardinals wide receivers have been a very strange sort of group to observe this year. And really it's just so difficult to predict. So, we saw Larry Fitzgerald have a huge week this week. That's all fine and great. Larry Fitzgerald is sort of the guy that you can rely on. John Brown this week only played 46% of the snaps. So you would be thinking, oh, well, Mike Floyd played a bunch then. Nope. 34% of the snaps. It's not a situation where either of them are getting a ton of work. John Brown's target totals through the first 5 weeks are 4, 3, 11, 16, and then 4. It's puzzling. It's really, really puzzling. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me at all. And then Floyd's are a little bit more consistent with 7, 6, 11, 7, and then 3. But I mean, how do you predict these guys? How do you decide which is the week that you need to have John Brown in your lineup and which is the week that you can't play him? I really don't know. And I'd be interested to hear other people's theories because I really don't understand how, with any sort of consistency, you can rely on a guy like John Brown in your lineup without getting wildly frustrated when he goes off on your bench other weeks. So it's a difficult situation. I don't really want to be owning him. If you can find someone to trade John Brown to, I probably would. This next one, guys, I'm going to apologize for. Shrek and I both talked to him, but myself mostly, really. Zach Ertz this past week in what seemed like an ideal lineup, or matchup rather, against the Detroit Lions. Zach Ertz had 85% of the snaps, but only 3 targets. He caught all 3 of them for 37 yards. Not really a consolation prize for me. Zach Ertz, I thought, was easily the best play in daily this week. I thought he was easily a guy you could plug into your lineup and get some solid production, and he just wasn't. So I'm not sure how to predict him going forward. You know, he was out there on the field, just really didn't get the targets, really didn't produce. It was probably the Eagles' offense, you know, their worst game as a whole. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's something we should get more used to. Maybe Carson Wentz was overperforming. I don't really know. But Zach Ertz, I think, for right now is probably not someone that we're really looking to start. On the Dolphins side of the ball, down there against Tennessee, Jarvis Landry broke a streak of 8 straight games with double-digit targets. And it's not like he broke it, like missed it by 1 or 2 targets. Jarvis Landry had 3 targets this week. That's not going to do it for him. That's not going to get the fantasy production that you need from Jarvis Landry because his targets are so close to the line of scrimmage. I think this is an outlier. I don't think this is a situation where you're looking to bench Jarvis Landry. Tannehill's been bad, yes. But Landry's had Tannehill as his quarterback for his whole career. Jarvis Landry had that streak of 8 straight games with double-digit targets with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. This isn't a change in situation for him or anything like that. I think this is just sort of a game where the Dolphins played terribly. They weren't able to execute what they wanted to do, and it didn't work out for Landry. So don't panic. Maybe if your Landry owner in your league is panicking, you trade for him. You maybe buy him a little bit cheap. Who knows? But we'll see what happens there. Another receiver just not getting the targets that we want was Julio Jones. Julio only had 6 targets, 2 catches, 29 yards this past week after his absolute explosion for 300 yards and a touchdown on 12 catches. So I think this is kind of the reality because we're not benching Julio. You're not missing that 12 catch, 300 yard game from him. And to be fair, in 3 of his games, he's been very good. In one of them, I believe he had 56 yards and a touchdown. The next one, he got over 100 yards and a touchdown. You know, he had that huge 300-yard game. And then in the other 2 games, he has 3 catches for a grand total of 43 yards. So that's tough. That's tough to stomach. But the upside is too high with Julio. The track record is too long with him, really. The Falcons are better as a whole, which is sort of siphoning off from some of his production. They don't have to rely on him as much. But, you know, Julio's a guy that you just kind of deal with the ups and downs because you can't really bench him. Actually, I'm going to save this one for last. I was going to start talking about someone, and now I'm not going to. I'm going to go right to the Texans offense. I think the Texans offense as a whole is extremely weak shit this past week. They did play the Vikings. That's certainly an excuse. The Vikings defense is great. DeAndre Hopkins got a TD. He managed to salvage a day because of that, a usable fantasy day. But Lamar Miller got pulled in the 4th when they were down big. He had 3 fantasy points. That's not going to do it for you. And then Will Fuller had 1 catch for 4 yards. I think this is the time to buy low on the Texans offense Because look at their schedule for the rest of the way. They're coming off of Minnesota, and particularly on Will Fuller, I think it's time to buy low. Because I think people may think, just he's a rookie. The first couple of weeks were fluky. This is really who he is. But this is their schedule as they continue going. Indianapolis, Denver, not great. But then Detroit, Jacksonville, Oakland, San Diego, Green Bay, Indy, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Tennessee. That's got to be one of the best schedules in the league for the passing game the rest of the way. Will Fuller still got 6 targets in this game, despite only catching one of them for 4 yards. This is an opportunity to buy low on an offense that's going to have a very, very, very easy schedule the rest of the way. And on a player in Will Fuller who I don't think people necessarily realize what a huge part of that offense he is at this point. Will Fuller has 40 targets. DeAndre Hopkins has 42 targets. Will Fuller is right up there with him. This is something where you might be able to buy low a little bit on both of them. Lamar Miller, I don't know what to think. This was a difficult matchup. I'm going to just hope and pray that he kind of picks it back up. We just saw Jordan Howard have a great game against Indy. Hopefully he does this next week as well. And so this is the one that I was waiting on, that I was really waiting to talk about, that I was going to before. But I wanted to close the week shit with this because, Vinny and I were texting last night during the Monday night game. And I don't know if you guys watched it. I know like the story that got the headlines was Roberto Aguayo missing the field goals. But Dirk Koetter had one of the most bizarre and absolutely moronic play calling games I've ever seen from an NFL coach. This is a guy who comes out against a team who just gave up 300 yards to Julio Jones, over 400 yards to Matt Ryan, and ran the ball 10 times on the first drive with Jacquizz fucking Rodgers. What are you doing? How little do you trust Jameis Winston that you have to just give the ball to Jacquizz Rodgers 30 times against a team that just got shredded in the pass game? It doesn't make any fucking sense. There was a 3rd and 9 with about 5 minutes left in the game. And this is after Aguayo had already missed a gimme field goal, where on 3rd and 9, instead of trying to pass for the first down, they run a draw to Rodgers for no gain, and then Aguayo misses a field goal. At that point, the game was tied. They got the ball back, and he continues to run these conservative-ass draws to Jacquizz Rodgers, these little plays that aren't really doing much to set up a fucking Aguayo field goal that ends up winning it. But, I mean, come on, man. It was like absolutely bizarre. It was so puzzling to me. I felt like I was tripping balls on some sort of drug. But yeah, so that's my rant on Dirk Koetter and how awful of a play caller he is. The, I guess, fantasy takeaway from this was that Jacquizz Rodgers was used heavily. 30 carries, 101 yards, 5 catches for 28 yards. Didn't get in the end zone, but despite being not that efficient, he was used a ton. They have a bye this upcoming week. We'll see if Doug Martin is fully healthy when he comes back. But I guess Jacquizz Rodgers is a pickup, and that fucking sucks. That makes me so mad. Please let me know if you felt the same way watching that game. If you were watching that, just like, what the fuck is going on? Because I had no idea what was happening during that game, and it just, oh God, it was so frustrating. All right, guys. So that's basically the week shit for this past week. I didn't get through everything, but covered, I think a lot of the pertinent topics here in the NFL here. So what I'm going to do here is just, I mentioned it a little before, the Vikings and the Bucks both have a bye week. So, keep that in mind when trying to fill your rosters. Stephon Diggs will hopefully get some time to fully heal up, as will Doug Martin, because I don't want to see fucking Jacquizz Rodgers on my TV anymore. And then the Thursday night, this week is, did I say the Thursday night this game? The Thursday night game this week is what I was trying to say. That's what I should have said. I don't know if I actually said it. Anyway, I guess I'm a little tired despite this awful tasting coffee. So we have Denver at San Diego this upcoming Thursday night game. As I said before, it's expected that Trevor Siemian's going to play. You don't need to start Trevor Siemian. I wouldn't worry about that. But as I said before, CJ Anderson still a start for me. Donald Stevenson and Virgil Green, two of their better blockers, should be back. This is possibly partially just me hoping, but I think this is the week CJ Anderson gets back on track. Sees the majority of snaps, is productive, hopefully gets in the end zone for the first time since week 1, but we will see. I think Sanders and Thomas are both also, definitely starts in this game. Sanders has been heavily targeted all throughout the season. He's clearly their wide receiver 1. And then Demaryius Thomas continues to be efficient and catch touchdowns. So he's not getting overly targeted. He's getting 7 targets a game. That's okay. He's been more efficient than he's going to be the whole season. It's going to regress at some point. He's catching basically a TD a game. Against San Diego, we'll see if Brandon Flowers is still out as their slot corner. Jason Verrett is, out for the season. So I think San Diego is now a passing defense that you can sort of attack, and you can continue to start Thomas there. On the San Diego side of the ball, I only want to start Melvin Gordon. Denver's pass defense is very good. You don't really want to play Travis Benjamin. You don't really want to play Tyrell Williams or Dontrell Inman. But we saw that Melvin Gordon – I'm sorry, not Melvin Gordon. We saw Atlanta really exploit the Denver linebackers with the running backs in the passing game. So this is sort of an opportunity for the rest of the league to play copycat. The Falcons have figured out how to do this, what they should be doing, how you attack Denver. Now it's just up to the rest of the league to do it. Now, is the San Diego coaching staff smart enough to? I don't really know. But it stands to reason that Melvin Gordon would be the guy who they try and attack these linebackers with, and would therefore be the guy that I would want to play in this game. Phillip Rivers, not a good start against Denver. Quarterbacks just aren't really doing it. I mean, Matt Ryan, I think, is an exception at this point. It's crazy how good that's been, and that's so weird to say. But what can you do? And then at the tight end position, we saw Hunter Henry and Gates both play a decent amount this past week. I don't really know how that snap breakdown is going to look in the coming weeks with Gates getting healthier. And against Denver, I don't think it's necessary to really play either of them. So I think that's going to do it, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up on Twitter, send us an email. You guys know where to find us. We're pretty easy to find. We'll either answer you, on Twitter via email or on the podcast. Vinny and Don are going to be back Thursday night, so you guys will be getting it on Friday for the Week 6 preview. Good luck with your waiver wire picks this week. Make sure you're getting some of those guys that I mentioned before. Pick up Cam Meredith, and I think that's going to do it, guys. So yeah, later podcast.